Now, this used to be my dining room, and this is what happens when you get interested or you develop a passion in life. It takes over, and it not only takes over you, but it takes over your rooms.
Since 1990, Lucy Pringle has been indefatigable in researching and photographing the hundreds of crop circles that have appeared in southern England.
So it's a massive filing job. Coming.
In the last week of May 2001, the first crop circle of the season has finally appeared, a month later than usual, nearly in Lucy's backyard in Hampshire.
Hampshire was the cradle of the crop circles in the 1980s. So it seems very fitting that with all the dreadful trouble we've had foot and mouth, that crop circles come back to where they started.
In Hampshire in 1978, the first crop circles were discovered. Each of them was nothing more than a simple circular depression, and little notice was taken. 2 years later, when they kept recurring, they attracted the attention of Dr. Terence Meaden, a meteorologist and physicist.
Whatever is at the origin of all this, it does take place in the atmosphere above the field.
Meaden believed that some circles could be explained by weather anomalies he called plasma vortices.
That's really just a bit of scientific terminology, which sounds very grand for something which is nothing more really than a vortex in the air which has been generated by some natural means. Some scientists have been able to show that such a vortex can collapse.
That may be sound science, but it would explain only the very simplest circles.
In the case of simple crop circles formed naturally, there's every reason to suspect that an eddy vortex has done it.
In 1981, the investigators were joined by Pat Delgado, an electrical engineer. Delgado was the first to suggest that the crop circles were the work of the paranormal. He soon found a convert to this belief. Colin Andrews, who today is considered the world's foremost authority on crop circles. Andrews stumbled across what for him would be a life-changing event.
Just like any other day. But I was just about here, just coming out of these trees, and I looked to the left, and there it was. And I saw 5 perfect circles forming a cross. My life basically changed. It was bizarre because I was a senior officer in the British government at the time, and I was simply driving a road that I drove often. It took me 20 minutes to get right to the circles themselves, and I can assure you, the only tracks in that field were my own. There was nothing there. There were no compression points, no damaged plants, no tracks. Can't explain it, but it threw a switch in my stomach. Something went click, and it was as if something was saying, that's your job. And to this day, it's my job.
By 1985, crop circles were appearing like mushrooms in fields all over the place. The phenomenon, whatever its cause, was growing. A plane and a camera were needed, and Busty Taylor was a pilot and a photographer.
In the 1990s, we were getting up to 3 or 4 or 5 different formations in the area overnight. In a matter of, like, the darkness here in the middle of the summer is only like 4 hours. Some of these formations, I can quite honestly say, definitely not man-made.
Busty was the last member of the original investigation team of converts.
Shake hands, then.
We all were friends, and we got on well. We saw one another at times, daily. much to the annoyance, obviously, of our families, because this was growing. This was becoming a bigger part of our lives by the day. The second angular ring, again, alternates its direction of flow.
In 1989, Andrews and Delgado published Circular Evidence, a book of the annual summer phenomenon. The fields of Hampshire would never be quite so empty again. Crop circles are ephemeral. Even if they remain until the harvest, the subtle shapes and finer details of the design are soon eroded by man and nature.
We're going to turn right and go up into the countryside.
The professionals depend on a small core of circle chasers to get there first, to photograph and study the freshly made formations.
This is the first crop circle behind us, the first crop circle of the season. And it's always terrifically exciting when you hear of a circle. And of course it's particularly exciting because it's just a few minutes from where I live. The geometry of that particular one behind us is really very simple.
It is what the circle chasers call an early season formation, a simple ring pattern seen many times over the years. But for the researchers, it marks the beginning of another season.
Unfortunately, we can't go in it because of the foot and mouth precautions, so this is really as close as we can get to it.
An American, Peter Sorensen, was first to come to Hampshire in 1992. He was so taken by the circles that he's returned every season since. His mission is to capture the phenomenon with his ever-present video camera.
It's a beauty. Oh, it's a beauty. Oh, dearie me.
My work as documenting crop circles is basically a simple and very enjoyable job.
The basket is brown underneath.
Okay, should be front of the here.
The second formation of the season has appeared. Peter's colleague, Nan Liu, has seen it from the road above the village of Pusey.
Don't mark them in, please.
Yeah. That's the one spot.
The summer landscape offers up the new formation, and Peter documents it from the air.
I love it. It's a great job. Somebody's got to do it.
Like many early season designs, it's a simple circle, something of a disappointment to the crop circle community. But their experience tells them better is still to come. Sure enough, a week later, a new formation appears in a common location beneath the Iron Age hill fort of Barbary Castle. The first circle chasers to arrive are Charles and Francis Mallet. Along with Francis's son Kieran, the family are among the group of full-time crop circle chasers.
Essentially, because we live in the immediate vicinity, we visit formations very early, as they arrive pretty much. Very often we're the first people in them. Measure them, draw them, take notes.
You need to go right to that point over there, look. What point? Right to the edge of this bit here. Standing barley. Are you to the edge?
It's the third formation of the year, and it's already 2 days old.
This is in barley. Fairly immature barley. That's why it's pretty much standing up after it's 2 days old.
In a few days, much of the pattern will be completely gone.
And so you have to see them immediately, and if you do, they're like stunning. The best formations always happen in barley. It's geometrically nice, if not a bit shabby on the ground, but I suspect it will look pretty damn good from the air.
Indeed it did. This first truly complex design meant that the 2001 season was finally taking off. At the heart of the crop circle area lies the tiny village of Alton Barnes. A local farmer, Polly Carson, is one person who loves the mystery and sees the circles as a sacred gift.
The year before, some neighbours had a crop circle, and I remember saying Tim, my husband, this really isn't fair, you know, we haven't had one. And it was a bit like keeping up with the Joneses, you know, everybody else has had one, so why can't we? And then within probably 2 or 3 weeks of that, we had the big one. Within 24 hours, we were inundated by the British press. Within 48 hours, we had the world's press here. We then started getting thousands and thousands of people arriving. Good boy. Well done. Good job.
Polly believes its appearance on her land was not just chance.
When it did arrive, to me it was like having something like Stonehenge on your land. You couldn't really keep people away. It wasn't fair. It belonged to everybody. I know lots of other farmers don't have that attitude. Maybe that's why it came here, I don't know.
By 1990, a community of believers was forming, and its high priest was Michael Glickman. Glickman believes research should focus not on geometry or physics, but on metaphysics.
Bang in July of 90, the first linear pictogram appeared on Polly Carson's land. Got a lot of publicity. And I just got in the car and came down with my youngest son. Went into that formation, and I think, metaphorically, I never got out. And when you walked in there, you were elsewhere. This wasn't planet Earth anymore. Your feet were tangibly on the ground and you were experiencing gravitational forces, but there was something about being in that very particular enclosure which made you realize that you were somewhere other. And I was a goner, finish. End of story. That was my life now.
An architect by training, Glickman now devotes his life to trying to find a message in the designs and from whom the messages come.
The attitude of modern science will be, how does it work? My attitude was try and read the message, which seems to me still, 11 years later or so, inarguably right.
Complex shapes were now replacing simple circles, and in July of 1991, the incredible formation next to the Iron Age hill fort of Barbary Castle excited the believers.
The arrival of Barbary Castle seemed to be taking the volume control and just turning it up. I mean, we were dazed by that, dazed by it.
After Barbary Castle, there were many converts. The circle showed no obvious evidence of human involvement, and its symbolic design strongly suggested an intelligence at work.
This'll be a longer walk than it looks. It always is.
They were thrilling times for the researchers. But the Wiltshire police took a more prosaic attitude to the phenomenon.
Well, the Wiltshire Constabulary have had reports of crop circles from local farmers, particularly in the Devizes area, since the early 1980s. The issue to stress here is that crop circling is an illegal act, but we only investigate them when farmers make the official report to us of criminal damage to their crops. Last year, just outside of Devizes, we found crop circle making equipment, and Matthew Williams, a local resident, was subsequently arrested and placed before the court, fined in order to pay compensation to the local farmer.
This is all the stuff that the police returned. They took all sorts of research materials of mine.
Matthew Williams is the only person ever arrested for creating a crop circle. Although dismissed as a hoaxer, he prefers to call himself a circle maker.
The reason I was arrested was because I'd offered to show a researcher in the States that circles could be made by humans.
So I got arrested because I provided evidence which he passed on to Michael Glickman. And Michael Glickman passed this on to the police and goaded the farmer into actually making a prosecution.
I was very proud to help engineer the prosecution of Matt Williams. I thought, here at last is something we can hold on to and touch. One item of truth about a hoax. Forget it.
Yet Matthew Williams is not so different from Michael Glickman in claiming a spiritual dimension to his work.
It's a spiritual thing for me, really. My passion in crop circles comes from knowing that we've had weird experiences whilst making them. And that those weird experiences mean that something was watching us, something else was there whilst we were doing these things. And that there are paranormal things connected with crop circles, but they're not the actual thing that creates the crop circle. People create crop circles. The paranormal is something else that surrounds itself in the areas where crop circles are made, or after crop circles are made, or during crop circles being made. I mean, that's really what I'm interested in.
The craziness that we get now, you know, absolute craziness, and it all goes back to Doug and Dave. It all goes back to the original foul lie.
In September 1991, following the most spectacular crop of crop circles ever, two men, the late Dave Chorley and his friend Doug Bauer, claimed they all originated with them.
There were no circles anywhere in existence before 1978, when we put the first one down.
I always think that Doug's, you know, when Doug and Dave made that first circle, it was a gift. You know, it was a gift to people to give them some kind of something mystical, something paranormal, something, you know, out of the ordinary.
John Lundberg, an artist and a fan, claims he helps to carry on the circle-making tradition that Doug started.
What's amazing, though, is it was such a simple process. You know, the act of you just making that first circle. Yeah. And then just look what happened. You know, it mushroomed.
Bauer claims that the first circle was just a joke.
I really wanted them to think that a UFO had landed in the night.
It was a total load of crap. You've never seen such a mess in all your life. Nothing like what we had witnessed. And it's very easy for people to come on in the background and say they've done all this and they've done all that. But when you ask them to replicate certain things, they could never do it.
Doug and Dave had claimed to have been making the crop circles. We know that story changed as the time went on. It wasn't now all of them, it was some of them. And then it wasn't these, well, it was just these. That story changed as time went on.
There is another bit of evidence that predates Doug and Dave. Researchers have uncovered evidence of crop circles dating back centuries. A report in the British journal Nature described several crop circles outside London in the 1880s. And there is some evidence from as far back as the 17th century when crop circles were thought to be the work of the devil. If some circles were a hoax by Doug and Dave, they weren't the first hoaxers.
The Doug and Dave thing was like a ticking time bomb. It was like a virus, which would infect the body of the crop circle community almost terminally. And we're dealing with that now, 10 years later.
I'm going to have to avert the camera's attention from a couple of these designs because they might...
According to Matthew Williams, there are more hoaxers than there are practicing believers.
You know, today in 2001, you've still got about 7 teams who'll be working in Wiltshire. New teams come and go every year. You'll always get new circle makers arrive on the scene, practice their art. That's why at the beginning of the season, you always get simple circles. And towards the end of the season, you know, you get these works of art.
By mid-July, The believers have descended on the area to attend the first of 3 annual Crop Circle conferences, this one hosted by the Wiltshire Crop Circle Study Group.
All right then, have a nice day. Cheers. Bye-bye.
For some who want to believe, it is a spiritual pilgrimage. They find guidance and help in the preaching of the conference organizer, Francine Blake.
I often get newspaper ringing me and they say, well, tell me about Crop Circle. What is it? Who makes it? What does it mean? Where does it take us? You know, we've got 2 minutes. It's a very big subject. I don't know where it's coming from. I know that it is from a high level of consciousness and that it is interacting with us. I know that it is guiding us and teaching us and opening some vistas for us.
Since 1999, Steve and his partner Karen Douglas have published a yearbook of the season's best formations.
Put a lot into our books, you know, to make sure that they're the best thing that we can do and that they portray something honest about the subject.
Elaborate man-made practical jokes or intelligent messages from space, Karen veers towards the latter for anyone open to such communication.
In 1992, the summer of that year, there were 4 formations, all within less than a mile of my house. And it was just uncanny. And I think I just felt from then on that, you know, it was sort of like somebody leaving their calling card saying, you know, hello, you know, do you know what's going on?
And some things are certainly unusual.
What is it?
I was on the hillside and just saw this glint. But then it started to move through the crop, glinting and flashing. And in the distance you can see a tractor driver. With an interview with a tractor driver that was done later, he said his engine actually cut out on the tractor as the object flew over. And he said the object would be as big as a beach ball.
UFOs are responsible for crop circles. I would say that there's some truth in that, because there are a lot of eyewitnesses that have actually seen what we term physical craft actually physically involved in generating the crop circles. So there's much more to this than meets the eye, but whether the UFOs alone are creating the genuine crop circles is only a tiny slice of reality.
Certainly some of those who investigate crop circles say that they feel something. They say that genuine crop circles exude subtle energies that can be felt and measured. If unusual forms of energy do exist in crop circles, where do they come from? There seems no shortage of possibilities.
Okay, what's happening here is I'm just dowsing for an energy line. That's the question I'm asking in my head. So
some believe it is the geomagnetic pulse of the planet.
Next question is now I'm asking for direction of flow. So I'm going to find out which way this is flowing.
Others think of the force of old ley lines, invisible paths of magnetic energy crisscrossing the countryside. Ley lines have an old pedigree. Prehistoric temples were believed to have been built on the intersection points of these energy lines.
They don't just appear near old places. They are very specifically placed near ancient monuments and ancient sites.
Other researchers study the geometrical shape and design of the patterns. To them, some formations exhibit at least a basic knowledge of science and religion. Most believers feel there is a message to be read if they could find the key.
In 1997, we sent 2 drawings to 2 surveyor companies. We just said, we have these design. We would like to have those imprinted in crops. What does it entail? One company said, you will need a team of surveyor. We would have to be there for about a week, 7 to 8 days. We would need satellite relayed equipment, and it will cost you about £7,000. And that's just to prepare the ground before it's even laid.
Late June in 2001, and the formations keep appearing. This one had the center cut out by the farmer in an effort to deter onlookers. In July, the phenomenon spread across the country to Cambridgeshire. The next day, there was a second design on the Carson farm. The author and researcher Andy Thomas and a colleague, Jeff Stray, investigated.
You often get formations where the tractor lines cross the formation, you get these edges where the crop's obviously just never laid flat.
Jeff Stray finds another common anomaly.
Quite often the first or the second node up from the base, and you just find that it's got a little hole and all the saps come out. Exploded nodes. You just get an overload in some, which causes this bursting open of the nodes. Levengood, who's a biophysicist who does the studies on these effects, he hasn't got an explanation of a natural cause for this.
The American biophysicist W.C. Levengood leads the scientific exploration of crop circles.
Okay.
Working with British field researchers, he developed a protocol for sampling and analysis. They'd provide the samples, he'd provide the data.
These expulsion cavities are unique with crop formations. These never occur in the controls. I've examined literally thousands of normal control plants, and I've never seen one, and no one else has, because they are literally unique with these crop formations.
Levengood believes the exploded nodes are the result of a brief burst of microwave energy at the moment the crop circle is formed.
The reason that the node is always affected by these energies is that there's a much higher water content here. The higher the dielectric constant, the higher the interaction with microwaves, which means that the microwave energy does more damage.
According to Levengood, the seeds from the crops within a crop circle are also affected. Not surprisingly, perhaps, they show a deterioration.
Here are the normal control seeds here. And you can right away see they're much smaller up here.
But the opposite is true when those seeds are allowed to germinate.
Here is the control wheat plants down here. Probably there are one or two that haven't even germinated. Now look at the plants from the formation, way up here. I found very accelerated growth and vigor in plants and seeds in crop formations. The science has been crushed here. We've been pushed aside. I think there's been some sort of intentional obfuscation of the truth and the scientific evidence. This one I sampled, and I found absolutely nothing. And then about a year later, I learned that it was done by a obfuscator of knowledge, I call them, or a hoaxer.
Whether they are hoaxers or circle makers, they exist, but understandably keep their activities secret.
We shall see.
Except Matthew Williams, who since his arrest and fine has gone public. At the time of the Wiltshire Believers Conference, he scheduled a rival meeting across the street.
I've done this sort of thing enough time, which happened to be today. So, you know, in a stark comparison to £55, I thought, well, why don't I put on a free conference telling people what they're not allowed to hear in this other one?
Well, one of Matt's problems is that he is very vocal about that he makes circles and what circles mean and what they are, and that they are man-made.
I've heard some interesting theories: hedgehogs mating, deer rutting, helicopter downdrafts. Yeah, or maybe it is just the aliens.
Even Matthew's self-confessed fellow circle makers admit that strange phenomena can be seen in the fields at night.
Slam the brakes on the car, go out the car, stood by the hedge, just watch these two bright lights sitting above the tree line, above the formation.
It looked like a satellite to me, this orange light, but then it stopped, and satellites don't do that, do they?
These two bright lights slowly float and drop down behind the trees, and they disappeared, gone.
And then another one come out from Golden Ball Hill, like Golden Ball, flew underneath the other one and stopped right over the top of this crop circle, and then they both blinked out.
So it is not only the believers who find strange things at night.
You know, everybody knows somebody who at least knows somebody who's had a very strange experience. Everybody here accepts that people put down circles and balls of light appear, or various other phenomena happen associated with these formations.
Some of these objects might be explained as ball lightning or some other natural phenomenon. Others are harder to explain. Whatever the truth, mysterious flashing lights have been linked to crop circles' creation since the earliest days. Each season is different. Some seasons throw up truly amazing crop circles. Others provide more evidence that man has been at work. One crop formation in 1996 thrilled the believers.
This fractal type crop circle appeared at Stonehenge in daylight in a 15-minute period.
There was a pilot who flew over it at around 5:30, he wasn't there at 6 o'clock, he spotted it. So there's a half an hour window where it happened.
It was a huge formation, named after a fractal pattern commonly known as the Julia set. Believers say it appeared in daylight and could have been seen by guards at Stonehenge.
Stonehenge is monitored 24 hours a day, so there's guards walking here 24 hours a day. So every hour they have to pass by the fence just at the end, and they didn't see anybody create a crop circle. They were here 24 hours a day, and so if it came, it would have come instantaneously.
It fueled the theories of mystical forces at work, and better was to come.
The Triple Julia set, which appeared at Windmill Hill in 1996, it's one of the icons of faith in the crop circle world.
It contained 194 circles and was over 500 feet in diameter.
The geometry is so accurate that it really beggars belief to many people that that could possibly have been man-made. Certainly nobody's ever claimed it to this day, and it's very, very beautiful.
On a typical English morning, grey and wet, the mallets are out as usual, hunting for new crop circles. Their route takes them through Alton Barnes towards Silbury Hill and Avebury, the most likely places to spot fresh formations.
We go out early as possible, visit the formations to get an accurate a picture as possible, before they're trampled to death by coachloads of tourists or whatever.
No, there isn't anything. There's one down that dip. We've got one. Over there, look. Woohoo! Where? Over there.
They know the formation was not there yesterday.
That's rather suspicious. The facts on the ground are telling us that most of what we're looking at is man-made, and it's clearly so. And last year and previous years, that just wasn't happening.
Yeah, it looks a bit, that hole looks a bit kind of like over deliberate almost, doesn't it? Really? Whacking great posts that big in there.
Well, we spend most of our time figuring out what's real and what's not.
I mean, this is going to be impossible to draw.
I'll draw it then. I've got to get measurements, that's all, sweetie. Once I've done that, you can draw it, okay? Is that the farmer? Charlie! Farmer! It's okay. Is he horrible? No. Well, it depends who it is. It might be Mr. Butler. If it's Mr. Butler, we're okay.
This is my land, all right? Nobody has permission to come in here. Okay?
Okay. Was the other one your field as
No,
well?
that wasn't mine. That was somebody else's, and nobody had permission to go in there either.
Oh.
For the last 10 years or more, we've had crop formations of one sort or another. Always around this sort of time of the year. We're never happy to see them. This year in particular, we are not granting people permission to go in the crop formations because of the recent foot and mouth problems.
But you can understand the farmer's point of view, can't you? You know, he doesn't know where we've all come from. I mean, it's quite a scary time, really, for the farmers.
What do you make of it? I guess to you it's just pure vandalism and it's made by people, all of them, is that your opinion?
I would think 90% of them, certainly, maybe more.
Local farmers admit to finding a few circles long before they became this fashionable.
We've used to see the old round circles that no one used to know anything about on their own, or that you might have had a formation of 2 or 3 together. But they were very often on flat pieces of ground that you wouldn't appreciate were there until you actually were there with the combine.
This formation is definitely man-made, a thank you note to the circle makers from 2 German researchers.
That's ambient in the standing crop.
It's also an opportunity for an American researcher, Ron Russell, to test a theory that man-made formations exhibit the same electromagnetic oddities as so-called genuine crop circles.
So we're approaching the Koch-Heiborg Formation. This is the ambient reading in the field. Now, this is a very strange, what's this?
Over here, this is the edge of the ring.
60, 70, 80, 90. Holy smoke.
This is right over the center right now.
Right over the center. So the high reading is around the outside of this center swirl. And then again, it falls right down.
So most crop circles show unusual energy patterns, even when they're known to be made by man.
Right back up. Considerable. Very interesting.
Not all the believers like the investigation or the findings.
They're doing totally with permission. They're doing totally with the farmer's understanding.
But you see, there's a whole world that's on the hoaxer thing, and I think you're feeding that.
Seems to me that it's a decent thing we're doing. We're doing good research. We're doing science. It was a controlled experiment. I think that was a necessary
It's not reprehensible like the hoaxers, but I still think it's a very low game that feeds the whole idea that human beings make these with the large world that can really use a transcendent energy.
It's not man-made, this, and it's not at our level, and it's coming from a very, very high level of consciousness, and it's beyond our understanding, it is beyond our knowledge. That is difficult to accept. The man with planks is dead easy to accept, because it fits in with the way we think.
If the crop circles are real, they're pulling away the very foundation stone of our society, our science, our religion, our technology, our economics, our sociology. That's scary.
Circle makers in the West Kennet Long Barrow appeal to the spirits of a different age. One man who embraces the pagan nature of circle making is Dan Darby. He lives with his wife and child in a narrowboat, travelling the canals of Wiltshire.
Dan Darby was a believer. He found out that circles were made by people and saw that this was a catalyst for making people to become enlightened, and got involved in the circle making teams himself.
I don't see it as a joke, and I don't see it as shamming people. This is something quite special and subtle and magical, you know? It's not a joke. The urge to want to know what's going on, the urge to find out what, you know, I mean, I understand you've got the hoaxers or the circle makers, and then you've got the researchers, but there's another consciousness, I think, dabbling around there, somewhere in between, sort of having a bit of a giggle, you know.
The 2001 crop circle season is coming to a glorious and striking end. Believers and circle makers alike descend on nearby Glastonbury. Glastonbury is England's spiritual capital, where ancient myth and magic meet New Age enlightenment, attracting visitors from all around the globe. It is here that the believers hold their last and largest conference of the year, the Glastonbury Crop Circle Symposium.
Yeah, that was a song about crop circles.
Lovely to see you. Welcome to the 11th Glastonbury Symposium.
As the conference gets underway, it is clear that the season has been a letdown. In particular, the self-confessed circle makers have got under their skin.
We're celebrating a very important 10th anniversary, the 10th birthday party of the Doug and Dave event. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. No, there are words to this. Happy birthday, dear Doug and Dave. Sleazy scoundrels whose lies spawn 10 years of falsehood. Happy birthday to you.
Despite that cloud over the proceedings, the 2001 conference was deemed a success. But the climax of the season was still to come. Believers and skeptics alike waited for the last of the formations to appear. They weren't to be disappointed.
It happened the previous Saturday night, over one night, that particular night, and I know because I was out on the hills, it was really terrible weather, serious precipitation. So this thing arrived over the course of one night in really bad weather. Jesus, you know, it took us 20 minutes to find the middle. This is how big it was. Circles. You know, our jaws kind of collectively dropped to the floor as we stepped into the formation.
What we have here is angels working with extraterrestrials, working with the earth spirits, working with the human beings who actually flatten the crop. There's such beauty and intelligence and majesty and synchronicity going on in the crop circles that it can't just be a bunch of jokers coming out of the pub. It's affecting the world in such a great, magnificent fashion that it can't just be us. It can't just be us.
Now, this used to be my dining room, and this is what happens when you get interested or you develop a passion in life. It takes over, and it not only takes over you, but it takes over your rooms.
Since 1990, Lucy Pringle has been indefatigable in researching and photographing the hundreds of crop circles that have appeared in southern England.
So it's a massive filing job. Coming.
In the last week of May 2001, the first crop circle of the season has finally appeared, a month later than usual, nearly in Lucy's backyard in Hampshire.
Hampshire was the cradle of the crop circles in the 1980s. So it seems very fitting that with all the dreadful trouble we've had foot and mouth, that crop circles come back to where they started.
A bigger part of our lives by the day. The second angular ring again alternates its direction of flow.
In 1989, Andrews and Delgado published Circular Evidence, a book of the annual summer phenomenon. The fields of Hampshire would never be quite so empty again. Crop circles are ephemeral. Even if they remain until the harvest, the subtle shapes and finer details of the design are soon eroded by man and nature.
We're going to turn right and go up into the countryside.
The professionals depend on a small core of circle chasers to get there first, to photograph and study the freshly made formations.
This is the first crop circle behind us, the first crop circle of the season. And it's always terrifically exciting when you hear of a circle. And of course it's particularly exciting because it's just a few minutes from where I live. The geometry of that particular one behind us is really very simple.
It is what the circle chasers call an early season formation, a simple ring pattern seen many times over the years. But for one, the investigators were joined by Pat Delgado, an electrical engineer. Delgado was the first to suggest that the crop circles were the work of the paranormal. He soon found a convert to this belief. Colin Andrews, who today is considered the world's foremost authority on crop circles. Andrews stumbled across what for him would be a life-changing event.
Just like any other day. But I was just about here, just coming out of these trees. And I looked to the left, and there it was. And I saw 5 perfect circles forming a cross. My life basically changed. It was bizarre because I was a senior officer in the British government at the time, and I was simply driving a road that I drove often. It took me 20 minutes to get right to the circles themselves, and I can assure you, the only tracks in that field were my own. There was nothing there. There were no compression points, no damaged plants, no tracks. Can't explain it, but it threw a switch in my...
In Hampshire in 1978, the first crop circles were discovered. Each of them was nothing more than a simple circular depression, and little notice was taken. 2 years later, when they kept recurring, they attracted the attention of Dr. Terence Meaden, a meteorologist and physicist.
Whatever is at the origin of all this, it does take place in the atmosphere above the field.
Meaden believed that some circles could be explained by weather anomalies he called plasma vortices.
That's really just a bit of scientific terminology, which sounds very grand for something which is nothing more really than a vortex in the air which has been generated by some natural means. Some scientists have been able to show that such a vortex can collapse.
That may be sound science, but it would explain only the very simplest circles.
In the case of simple crop circles formed naturally, there's every reason to suspect that an eddy vortex has done it.
In 1981,
something went click, and it was as if something was saying, that's your job. And to this day, it's my job.
By 1985, crop circles were appearing like mushrooms in fields all over the place. The phenomenon, whatever its cause, was growing. A plane and a camera were needed, and Busty Taylor was a pilot and a photographer.
In the 1990s, we were getting up to 3 or 4 or 5 different formations in the area overnight. In a matter of, like the darkness here in the middle of the summer, is only like 4 hours. Some of these formations, I can quite honestly say, definitely not man-made.
Busty was the last member of the original investigation team of converts.
Shake hands, then.
We all were friends, and we got on well. We saw one another at times, daily, much to the annoyance, obviously, of our families, because this was growing. This would become